Welcome to the All Out Leadership Podcast, hosted by Pastor Eric Lawson, where each episode is uniquely designed to help you live all out by bringing you practical leadership from a biblical perspective delivered in 10 minutes or less. So whether you're a business leader, serving in ministry, or simply looking to grow in your leadership, this podcast is for you. Before we dive into this week's topic, make sure to subscribe to the podcast and download the show notes at ericlawson.com/podcast. And while you're at it, feel free to share the content on social media. Now, let's join Pastor Eric for this week's conversation.
Welcome to another edition of the All Out Leadership Podcast. So glad you're joining us. We're going to talk about the subject of confrontation today. We've been looking at Saul, who's been this enemy above David that has been persistently pursuing him and really just being a thorn inside of David's life. We all have those from time to time. Do you confront? Is it okay to confront? If we're Christians who walk in love, do we just become a doormat and never share our feelings or our opinions with such people? So 1 Samuel chapter 24, verses 8 through 12. King Saul goes into a cave. He stops to take a break, and David has an opportunity to kill him, and he doesn't, and there's a dialogue that takes place between David and Saul. David also arose and went out of the cave and called out to Saul, saying, "My lord the king." And when Saul looked behind him, David stooped down with his face to the earth and bowed. And David said to Saul, "Why do you listen to the words of men who say, indeed, David seeks to harm you? Look, this day your eyes have seen that the Lord delivered you into my hands in the cave, and someone urged me to kill you, but my eyes spared you, and I said, I will not stretch out my hand against the Lord's anointed, for he is the Lord's anointed. For the Lord judge between you and me, and let the Lord avenge me on you, but my hand shall not be against you." David had an opportunity to kill Saul. He was urged by others to kill Saul. He was probably even given some Bible verses on why he would be justified in defending himself from his well-meaning friends, but David didn't do it. Now, what David did do is he cut the corner of Saul's robe, and his conscience was stricken when he undermined the authority of Saul. We talked about that in a previous lesson. I want to bring this out. Character is what you would do if you knew you would never get caught. Character is what you would do if you knew you never got caught. David had an opportunity to defend himself, kill Saul. Really, in many ways, he would have been justified in doing this. But what David said is he goes, "I'm not going to take vengeance into my own hands." But at the same time, he did confront Saul. At the same time, he said, "Hey, look, you've wronged me. God judged between us. You're getting misinformation." We see some confrontational principles that David brought even to a senior leader to confront certain things that are wrong. So I want to talk about biblical confrontation and how we need to apply some practical things inside of our leadership. I want to read to you Matthew chapter 18, verses 15. "If your brother sins against you, go show him your fault or his fault, just between the two of you. If he listens to you, you've won your brother over. But if he will not listen, take one or two others along, so that every matter may be established by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. If he refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if he refuses to listen even to the church, treat him as you would a pagan or a tax collector." So we're going to look at the biblical model of confrontation when you are having something that somebody's doing that becomes enough of a thorn inside of your life that it's going to hinder you from being able to move forward. This would be principles that apply to relationships above you, beside you, and below you, because these principles transcend position. I'm going to say that again. These biblical principles transcend position, and these are just kingdom principles that we can apply. First thing we see is this: there's a process. You go up as you talk. The Bible says, go to that person that offended you. If they don't listen, then you bring in somebody else. If they don't listen, then you go up the food chain of leadership, so to speak, in inviting spiritual leaders into the process. If you go outside a process and you begin to go to others that aren't part of the solution, then that's called gossip, and that is a sin. In fact, in Proverbs, it says there are 6 things God hates. 7th is an abomination, and that is one who sows discord. What was interesting, it didn't say the discord. The Bible actually said the one who sows discord. In other words, God has a deep passionate hatred when someone is stepping into dividing the body of Christ, dividing others, sowing discord. And so God takes it very serious. In fact, the rabbis taught that gossip was equal to the sin of murder because you're murdering somebody's reputation. And in essence, you killed that person and their influence in the eyes of everybody else. So it's on the same planes as murder. That's why God puts it there. So step one, do go to the offender. So even if it's somebody above you, if you're having a consistent issue with your boss, I encourage you, apply these principles, go into your boss. If you have a colleague and a coworker and you're running into these constant challenges and these irritations and you can't get past it and it's going to hinder you mentally, emotionally, or from being effective, go to your colleague. And then if it's somebody below you, you can apply these same principles. And then continue to go up if you can't get resolution. Here at Element Church, inside of our staff, I desire a culture where even though I'm the pastor, even though I'm, quote, somebody's boss, if they're having a constant conflict with their supervisor, their leader, and they feel that, hey, this is important, I can't get past this, we're not seeing eye to eye, that they can appeal and go up and say, hey, we need to go up. Let's talk to another leader, or let's bring in one of their colleagues and process it. And then if they still can't get resolution, you can bring it all the way up the food chain, all the way up to my office, and I do make time to help mediate certain challenges between staff and even their boss. And here's what I found. Not every boss is right. And sometimes that appeal was correct. And sometimes I can help both parties get a clear perspective of how to love and serve one another. So here's a couple practical things on how to appeal, how to give feedback when you are frustrated with somebody. Number one, start with giving that person the benefit of the doubt. Most of the time, I find that it's really just genuinely a misunderstanding. What Satan wants us to do is to doubt the motives and the intents of other people. Satan wants you to assume the worst about your boss, to assume the worst about that brother, that colleague, that somehow they had some ill will against you and what they did. Now, truthfully, sometimes they do. But give them the benefit of the doubt, because I have found that most of my tension points are misunderstandings. It was miscommunications. It wasn't a motive problem. It was a misunderstanding problem. Number two, you could begin with soft entrances like this. When you said, or when such and such happened, or when such and such didn't happen, it really made me feel neglected. It made me feel uncared for. It made me feel unimportant, or whatever it made you feel. And so you're not attacking the person. What you just simply do is you're bringing an awareness of, hey, when this happened or when this didn't happen, it just made me feel whatever that is. Here's why I like the word feeling, and many psychologists like the word feeling, is because nobody can argue with how something made you feel. It's actually how it made you feel. When you start trying to bring it first to the task or to a person, people tend to get defensive. But I can't argue with how I made you feel, because that was your feeling and it's true to you. Now, it might not have been a fact in terms of why you feel that way, but it is a fact that you do feel that way, and your feelings should matter. And then follow up with something like this. Just help me understand. Help me understand the thought behind that. I don't think that was your intention to make me feel that way. And when you're doing it that way and you're sandwiching it and giving them the benefit of the doubt, and then you're kind of just saying, hey, this is how I felt, help me understand that. Most of the time, what you'll end up hearing is, oh my gosh, I had no idea. I'm so sorry. Thank you for telling me about that. That's about 90% of what happens is, oh, wow, thank you. I had no idea. Or, oh, wow, I could see how you would feel that way. That's not what I meant. And it opens up the door for dialogue. If you don't bring dialogue, then it remains in the dark. And Satan is the Lord of the dark. Whatever you keep in the dark, Satan has power. Satan will speak in the dark. But when you bring it to the light and you bring it to the open, that's where Jesus lives. That's where Jesus resides. Then that's where Jesus is going to work. So bring it to the light and let God bring resolution into that. The fourth thing is this: listen to understand. Now that you've asked, help me understand, now it's your job to listen to understand. Let that person talk. Here's what most likely is going to happen. As you're listening to them, you're going to go, oh, I can see how they got there. I can see how they made that decision. Oh, that makes sense. And now you're beginning to put yourself in the other person's shoes. then you can begin a dialogue out of that. And then you could just follow up with simple things like, oh, wow, that makes sense. I could see that. Hey, can I make a suggestion? Some nice little statement like that. In the future, what if we, or in the future, what do you think about? Then you're leading with questions, you're leading more with suggestions, and then ultimately it's going to help bring resolution on the issue. And if you continue to give the benefit of the doubt, you continue to listen to understand one another, ultimately you'll get resolution and you can close the door. Sometimes you don't get resolution and it's just, you know what, I'm not quite there. But you know what? Value our relationship. We'll just go ahead and agree to disagree, and we'll just keep moving forward and doing the best we can. That's okay too. Now, let's talk about the person receiving feedback, because right now, somebody that on your team is listening to this and they're thinking about you. I know you're thinking about them, but they're also thinking about you. So there's going to be somebody that goes, hey, I heard this really great podcast. I'm going to apply that. And they're going to come to you and they're going to bring a problem to you. They're going to bring an issue to you. And it's your job to be an active listener, to be part of the solution. So let me just share how to receive. And this is harder. It's much more enjoyable to confront than to be confronted. But we have to become proficient as leaders at both, because there are just times I'm wrong, and a wise leader knows they have blind spots. And the best leader surrounds themselves with people that will tell them what they need to hear, not what they want to hear. So, number one, don't react. I want to get better. So sometimes I'm going to have to listen to things that hurt, and I'm going to look for the kernel of truth. It may not all be accurate, but some of it might be. So if it's just 1% of what they said, I can learn from that and get better. Number two, I am going to listen to understand. So when somebody goes, hey, I just want to be able to share something with you, and then it's just, you know what? I want to hear what you have to say. I'm listening to understand. And this is the hardest part. Keep your mouth shut. Fully let that person talk. And then something like this. Okay, that's good. Was there anything else? And you'll find, yes, there was something else. And then you're going to have to stop and you're going to listen again. Number three. So what I hear you saying is, and then you break down all that information, and then you just go, what were the one or two or three main things they were trying to communicate in there? And go, so what I hear you saying is one, and then I also hear you saying, and then just something like this. Did I get that right? You probably didn't. They're going to talk a little bit more, refine it for you, and then you're going to go, okay. And then you just go with, you know what? I can imagine that made you feel, and then you empathize with their feelings. Empathy is one of the pillars of emotional intelligence, being able to empathize and feel and understand. You don't have to agree to understand. You don't have to agree to feel. You don't have to agree to empathize, but you can go, I can see how you got there. And your feelings do matter to me because you matter to me. And you are part of your feelings. And then own anything that you can. Hey, I'm so sorry. And that's a word that's lost in our culture. I like I'm sorry, please forgive me, better than I apologize. Apology is easy. Sorry is harder. So just go, hey, you know what? I'm so sorry. Would you please forgive me? That was not my intention. But nonetheless, I know that still hurt you. And man, I'm sorry. And what can I do to fix this? How can I make this right? And then you just work out steps, and sometimes they might go, it's all good now, or they may go, hey, if you could do this, it would really help me move forward, and listen to that. And then the last thing is this: thank them for having the courage to make the difficult conversation possible, and just go, thank you for caring enough to bring this to my attention. I appreciate this. And again, if there's something like this ever happens again, please bring it to me. If you'll do that, what you'll breed is a culture of honest confrontation, the truth in love, keyword love, and it'll create a healthy team culture.
Thank you for joining us on the All Out Leadership Podcast. We hope you gained new biblical insight that challenged you to grow in your leadership. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, we would love your help in getting the content out farther. You can help by subscribing to the podcast at ericlawson.com/podcast and telling others about it. Next week, Pastor Eric will be back with another episode. So until then, we hope you have a great week being an all-out leader.